So first off, thank you all for joining us. We've got a great presentation to share with you tonight. We'd love to hear your feedback. Before we get into it in detail, I just want to cover a few things that are on the screen here. So again, we're all starting in muted mode. That's by design. We just kind of want to minimize any crosstalk or any inadvertent background noise. True story, was on one of these meetings, a police cruiser went by, someone wasn't near their mute button, caused a pretty loud situation for about 30 seconds. So we just want to avoid things like that. When the time is right, we obviously will open up for Q&A, questions, comments, and things like that. And so we'll do so by using the raise hand feature in the Q&A box, which I'll cover in just a moment. But we're going to start in just a moment with the main presentation. And when we share that content, that's going to take the bulk of the screen. The rest of us will show up, including you, will either as a strip across the top or down the side. Again, that's by design. That's just how Zoom works. When we're done with the presentation, we're going to stop sharing screen so we all come back on the screen like this and we can see each other's faces and things like that. Again, please keep your microphone muted during the presentation itself. If you have a question, again, we'd love to hear from you. You can submit questions in a couple different ways. Down below, you can use the raise hand. It looks like a high five. You can use that button as well. And that will send up a command for me to let me know that you want to raise your hand. I will see the hands raised throughout the presentation, but just know we're going to wait to the end to get to that. So it's not that we're ignoring you. We just want to get through the presentation first. If you're bashful or if you'd rather not speak, you can use the Q&A box down below. Again, it's questions and answers. You can type in a question. You can type them throughout as you have them or write them down, or you can enter them later toward the end. Again, if you submit that, thank you very much. We'll get to it when we address the formal Q&A period at the end. Know that if you enter a question, we may end up covering it during the presentation as well, which is entirely fine. Again, we're going to ask you guys to stay on mute during their presentation, and when we get to the verbal piece of raise hand, you'd like to ask a question, I'll let you know to come off mute. The hand raising is a really good feature inside Zoom because it tracks the order that hands were raised. This way we can make sure everyone gets a fair chance to speak. If you've got more than one comment or question, great, thank you for that. We do ask that you try to keep that question or comment period when it's your turn to speak to one at a time, and then lower your hand and then just get back in line just to give everyone a fair chance, okay? This is the first of 2 meetings. Today is October 1st. We have another meeting coming up on October 8th. So if you have a question that comes up between now and then, you'll have another opportunity to work with the developer or to listen to the team here to ask a question. If for some reason you want a follow-up question that we don't get a chance to speak to tonight, you can join that other meeting as well. We're gonna run this from about 6:30 to 8:30 or so. We'll try to end around then to be respectful of everyone's time. So again, if there's a great Q&A session, we don't get to everything, we have another opportunity a week from tonight. Let's see. Again, if you want to take a moment to rename yourself in the meeting if it doesn't reflect who you are. So for example, we see people like iMac24, just helps us interact with you so we know who you are later on. Just take a moment to, if you don't plan on interacting with us, that's fine. But if you do, makes it easier for us to call you by a first name at least, or at least a first name and initial, just so we know who you are. And like any other public meeting, just ask everyone to, we have expectations of decency, decorum. So when it's your turn to speak, please ask one question. Let's try not to talk over each other and those kinds of things. And again, we're here to share some information and really hear questions and comments from you. So with that, I'm going to stop my video and I'll probably stop my mic. And if all goes well, you won't hear from me during the presentation. I'll come back on for Q&A toward the end. I may have to hop on here and there to perhaps turn off a microphone or just kind of reset the rules of the road. But again, if all goes well, you're not going to hear from me until we get to the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to stop speaking and I'm going to hand it over to Bob Doherty at Boston Development Group to kind of kick off our presentation in earnest. Bob, when you unmute your mic, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 66 Galen Street Community Meeting. My name is Bob Doherty. I'm Vice President of Boston Development Group, the project proponent, and also a partner in the proposed development. Before we get started, I wanted to take a minute to thank Council President Mark Sedaris, a neighborhood resident, and also District Council Lisa Feltner for coordinating this meeting. It's much appreciated. Thank you too to Steve Magoon, Gideon Schreiber, and the entire planning staff with whom we've worked closely over the past year and a half, and whose input on design, traffic, and overall development have helped shape the project. Tonight we have the full development team assembled, and you will be hearing shortly from our architects, David Manfredi and Tim Talent of Elkis Manfredi. Jeff Dirk from Van Ness Associates will speak to traffic. Craig Finn, VHB, relative to civil engineering, and Shauna Gilly-Smith of Ground, landscape architect. All will be available to answer any questions you may have in the Q&A session immediately following the presentation. I thought it'd be helpful just to provide a little bit of context and background as to who we are and how we came to be tonight. Boston Development Group has been the long-term owner of 51 Water Street, which directly abuts the development site. During our 20-plus year ownership period, unfortunately, we've witnessed an overall decline and deterioration of abutting properties along Galen Street. You need look no further than the closed Colonial GMC Buick dealership, which has been closed for a couple of years now. The former Prime gas station, which was adjacent to Colonial, also closed and later demolished. 84 Galen Street, a two-family residence that was burned to the ground in 2014 and was never rebuilt. Along with 88 Galen, a small bungalow that was in a state of disrepair, which was ultimately condemned. All of these factors really serve to motivate us to acquire these properties, and we've successfully done so over the last year or so, always with an eye toward redevelopment and improving the area. We also recognize from the outset that traffic would be a challenging aspect to any redevelopment, and we've really worked diligently to come up with solutions that improve the present condition. As I mentioned briefly a moment ago, we have met with Watertown planning officials on multiple occasions. We've carefully reviewed the 2011 Watertown Strategic Framework and the 2015 Comprehensive Plan to better understand the town's visions and goals for this South Square area. Our project has been largely informed by the respective stated goals of these two important documents. In short, our intention is to deliver a best-in-class project with a thoughtfully designed and sustainable structure with increased public realm in the form of two publicly accessible parks, improved pedestrian access and experience along Galen Street, which will include the elimination of 7 curb cuts, and to fundamentally improve traffic flow by adding a dedicated bus lane, which would run along the entire Galen Street length of our project. Obviously, this would serve to get buses out of the traffic queue, particularly at peak hours. We've also proposed adding a signalized light at newly constructed Water Street, perpendicular to Aldrich, and in conjunction with our ongoing discussions we're having with MBTA and town planning, coming up with a solution that would have the T close their 2 ingress and egress points, which are located close to the bridge, and the lights at Galen and Onantum, and also which are problematic and really add to the bottlenecks and delays at this intersection. If our project is approved, it will generate substantial property tax revenue to the town, which we've estimated at $2.3 million based on discussions with assessors and looking at a potential valuation and the new commercial tax rate. We hope you find the following presentation informative. Thank you again for this forum, and we do look forward to answering questions in the Q&A session. I will now turn it over to David Manfredi and Tim Talon from Elkis Manfredi.
Good evening, everyone. I am David Manfredi from Elkis Manfredi Architects. I'm joined by my colleague, Tim Talon, and I think this photograph actually tells a very big story. This is an extraordinary, and as Bob says, very underutilized parcel. And as you can see, bounded, as you all know the neighborhood so well, bounded by Galen Street and Water Street. And why do I say it's extraordinary? Well, it is the proximity to Watertown Square. It is marvelous views to the Charles River. It's access to the Mass Pike, as well as access to the MBTA bus service. And most importantly, it is an important parcel in the town of Watertown. Next, please. very, very briefly, our firm, Elkus Manfredi Architects, excuse me, is located in Boston with diverse work really around the country and a specialty in science and technology. I believe that we are all very fortunate to live and work in Boston, Cambridge, Watertown. We have great universities, we have great medical centers, and we as Elkus Manfredi Architects have had the great advantage and good fortune to work with many of those universities, to work with research institutions, the large biopharmaceutical companies, as well as developers like Boston Development Group. Please let me introduce Shauna Gilly-Smith from Ground Inc.
Shauna, you're muted. If you could, there you go.
I apologize.
That's okay.
Thank you very much, David. I wanted to say how excited we are as landscape architects to be working on this particular project. As David said, the site is extraordinary in many ways. From a landscape perspective, the proximity to not only Watertown Square, but Charles River, and the potential to really impact the quality of the urban streetscape is really, one of the things that is most exciting to me about the project. We're landscape architects. We're located in Union Square in Somerville. Our work, it's a full range of the type of work. I would say the consistent aspects of it is that it is always involving the public realm and generally in urban conditions. We can move, next slide, please. And I'll introduce, with this slide, I'll introduce Tim Talon from Elkus Manfredi, who will talk about the planning framework for the project.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you everyone for joining tonight. So as Bob mentioned, we approached the design of this building by first seeking to understand the town's vision and the character of the neighborhood around it. So I'll first talk through this, what exists today, the goals that have been set for the site, and then we'll introduce our design. We started with Watertown's comprehensive plan, which sets a vision for the future of the town. It refers specifically to this site as the South Square Economic Development Focus Area and notes the opportunities for transit-oriented development, for improvements to the public realm. But it also notes the challenges, and particularly about connectivity, the pedestrian realm that exists today, and the need for additional open space. The comprehensive plan really informed the aspirations that we as a team set at the outset of this project, to create a social, a memorable, and a human-focused place. And these goals are not just to inform how the building users will experience the project, but also the relationship between the building and the community around it. So as we saw before, the location of the site is along Galen Street, between Galen and Water Street. Here's the river and then Watertown Square to the north. As Bob mentioned, Boston Development Group also owns the building at 51 Water Street here, and there's the potential for a future phase 2 on this site. But today we're just talking about a building design on the phase 1 site. That is what's proposed. Many of you know the site today. It's primarily auto-related uses. I believe it's only 8% of the site today is not either buildings or asphalt. This is a photograph from the intersection of Water Street and Galen Street. Looks like it was taken a few years ago when Colonial Buick was still active. And a few more photos which show the challenges around the site. Here's an existing sidewalk along Galen Street, about 5.5 feet wide, and along Water Street, where there actually is no sidewalk today. And one of the primary project goals has been improving the pedestrian realm. Another important feature of the site is its topography. Galen Street slopes down from the south going north towards the river and towards Watertown Square. So at the southwest corner of the site, we're at approximately elevation 37 feet. Water Street's at elevation 10. So it's approximately 27 feet of difference in elevation between the two sides of the site. And so that's informed the building design. We'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. We looked at the land use of the buildings around the site. And the comprehensive plan refers to Galen Street as an emerging commercial corridor. On the west side of Galen Street, on the project side, it's primarily commercial uses, both around the building and down Galen Street. But on the east side, it is a residential neighborhood, which many of you probably live in. And that proximity to the neighborhood and the need to be respectful of the neighborhood is something that is a primary goal for us. Looked at automobile circulation. We know Galen Street is the busiest street in Watertown by traffic volume. So we've looked at ways not just of mitigating the impacts of the project, but how we can improve traffic flow overall in the area. And also looked at bus and transit circulation. This is an important site in terms of the opportunity for transit-oriented development. Today, there's 4 bus routes that travel northbound on Galen Street that circulate into the MBTA's bus yard, which is next to the site. They enter the bus yard, circulate through, and then come back out close to Nonantum, creating a not very friendly and in some ways unsafe condition here. And so we have worked both with the town and the MBTA to find ways to improve that. And then last, as we started to look at the design of the building itself, we were informed by Watertown's strategic framework for economic development, which talks specifically about the importance of strengthening connections to Watertown Square, strengthening connections to the river, and the opportunity for a distinctive landmark building in this important civic location, but also for respecting the adjacent neighborhood. And so now I'll turn it back to David Manfredi to introduce our building design.
Thank you, Tim. Obviously, we're here tonight to talk about a building, which is 66 Galen Street, a new building for life science. But every bit as important is the dedication of significant land here to a new street and to very significant open space. What you're looking at is the building footprint where you see the label 66 Galen Street, but all the green space is publicly accessible open space. There are 2 parks, actually, a park on the west, towards Watertown Square that is publicly accessible, a venue for the neighborhood, a venue for the town, and the improvements around it aim to and will solve the traffic issues and the bus turnaround issues that Tim described, and we'll talk about that in great detail. To the east, you see another park, and this is quite an extraordinary one that Shauna will talk a lot about. It will create accessible access from Galen Street to Water Street, which of course creates access to the Charles River, open to everyone, and accommodating all of those grades that Tim mentioned in a really quite dramatic way. I think it's going to be a very, very memorable space. I think what's really important here, again, is we're very excited about the building, but we're also just as excited about public realm, about open space, and really providing significantly improved circulation for the MBTA and for everybody who comes through this important intersection in town. Next, please, Tim. Some very simple statistics. 44,000 square feet, which represents about 40% of the entire site, is shown here as publicly accessible open space. Remember, the site is about 2.5 acres. And so over an acre of publicly accessible open space, a building that is just under 200,000 square feet. You'll see that it is 4 and 5 stories, meaning it's in some places 4 and in some places 5 stories. There is approximately 25,000 square feet of solar panels on the roof. and 277 parking spaces that are all below grade parking, not visible from any street. And in fact, it is on the roof of the below grade parking that winding park makes the connection between Galen Street and Water Street. Tim will now take us through the floor plans.
Thank you, David. So I'll go through the floor plans, starting with the lowest level of the building. The lowest level is predominantly parking, and I'll just use this slide to show the entrance to that parking garage, which is right here off of Water Street. Both the entrance to the parking and then the entrance to the loading dock are both off of Water Street. There are no vehicular entrances to the building off of Galen Street here. So the lowest level of the building, here's that entrance to the parking level and the entrance to the loading dock here. The lowest level is predominantly parking. It is a few feet below the elevation of Water Street. And there's a 3-bay loading dock on this side as well. The loading dock is completely enclosed. And all trash is located within the loading dock as well, so there'll be no exterior dumpsters on the project. We're also locating the transformer vault on the building, electrical transformers within the footprint of the building. So cars will enter off of Water Street, circulate through the lower level of parking. And again, because of the topography of the site, Water Street is down at elevation 10. This is the new Water Street on this side, and then Galen Street on this side. All these edges of the parking are below grade and not visible from the street. So cars will circulate up an internal ramp to get to a second level of parking. But again, because of the topography of the site along Galen Street, this edge of the building here, these edges of the parking are below grade and not visible from the street. We are up one level up, and at this level, we are locating the building lobby, fronting out onto the new neighborhood park, onto the bus stops that are being created, and those transit connections, and then the view corridor to Watertown Square beyond. We have internal bike parking for the project, a secure indoor bike parking, approximately 45 spaces on this corner of the building with a direct connection to the building lobby. And that's about twice or more than twice the number of required bicycle parking spaces. We're very excited about the proximity to the Charles River and the connections to the bike paths there. As we go farther up the building to tenant level 1, we're now above ground on Galen Street. And we have at the most prominent corner of the building, we have a large building lobby that is split between 2 levels, a lower lobby level and an upper lobby level. The upper lobby level will have retail space within it that's not separate but connected to the lobby. That'll be open to the public. It'll have an entrance off of Galen Street. We really see this lobby as a space that we want people to spend time in, not just pass through, in a way to realize the goals that we talked about earlier for creating a social and a human-focused building and a very active edge. Of that, tenant level 2, our typical lab user floor plate. Level 3 is similar. And then at level 4, we are setting back along Galen Street. So this floor is smaller than those below it in order to minimize the apparent height along Galen Street, along the west side. And this is looking down on the roof of the building, showing that the majority of the roof over the mechanical penthouse is going to be covered with solar panels. The majority of the equipment, the building equipment, is located inside the mechanical penthouse, not outside. That equipment, which does need to be located outside, is going to be located within a well on the east side of the building, so away from, on the side away from the neighborhood. So we began to shape the building in 3 dimensions and develop the massing in the building. Started with Watertown's set of design guidelines, which really provides an excellent vision. And then I'll look at both of those design guidelines and the considerations of its proximity to the surrounding neighborhood. The image on the left is something you may have seen earlier during the zoning process. Is the building in its a similar building in its most simple form. 4 levels of space above 2 levels of parking. And what we found with this form when setting it on this site, because of the topography with the street sloping down, those edges of parking became visible onto the street, creating very unfriendly edges. And so that's what you see here with the darker shaded color. So as we began to shape the building, and what you saw in the building plans is we moved the parking to be off of the building edges and located the most active use, the building lobby, fronting onto the neighborhood park and those transit connections, and you see that in red. And then the orange space, the retail space along Galen Street. We also introduced additional setbacks along Galen Street to create wider sidewalks, and today we're proposing about 15-foot wide sidewalks along the full length of that street, and actually wider at the southern edge. And then as we looked further at the massing, we introduced an additional setback at level 4 along Galen Street and at the southern edge of the building to allow that sloping park to come out to Galen, to reach out to Galen Street. And then sculpturally express the intersection of the building volumes to create an interesting and dynamic form facing the view corridor from Watertown Square, and then also to create a covered plaza outside of the building lobby. So here that is in 3 dimensions. The neighborhood park with the bus drop off and pickup on either side. The building lobby will be below here. And what you're seeing on the roof here is the array of solar panels and the setback at the southern edge of the building. The materiality, the primary building material is a light colored terracotta tiles, which is kind of a more modern version of a traditional masonry building. They're high quality, they're durable, clay tiles that are fired similar to brick. And because of the manufacturing process, they allow for a huge amount of variability and variation in texture. And we look forward to continuing to work with planning staff and with the review boards as the design of the building evolves to create a beautiful building that really enhances the character of the neighborhood around it. So we have a couple of views from around the building. This is at the intersection of New Water Street and Galen Street. So the new street that's being created, the neighborhood park is on this side. We're looking into that large, open, transparent building lobby and retail space on the ground floor, covered by the building projection. You see the new streetscape along Galen Street, the wider sidewalks, the new regularly spaced shade street trees, which we'll talk more about further in the presentation. And then the next view will be at this end of the building, at the southern edge of the building. So this is looking across Galen Street, where that park space comes out onto Galen Street. We've set back this corner of the building to allow for a more comfortable transition and to make this as inviting and welcoming as possible. And then a view from above, looking at the south side of the building. The south side has a more curvilinear geometry, which relates to the more natural environment of the Charles River beyond. It also helps unify the open space that's adjacent to it, connecting out to Galen Street and then through to what we call Sloping Park. And then a view from Water Street looking up at the Sloping Park. And now I'll turn it over to Shauna Gillies-Smith, who will talk more about the landscape design.
That Tinkerbell sound doesn't typically come with me. So thank you very much, Tim. I thought before we started talking about the landscape specifically, it's good to kind of remind us again of the context. As Tim had mentioned, currently it is primarily an asphalt landscape. And then we've done our best with these red arrows to mark the curb cuts, which mean the areas where there's a vehicular entrance across the sidewalk into the street, into the site. And in addition to the benefit of providing these two publicly accessible parks, a major goal of this project is to enhance the pedestrian realm of the area. So, kind of bridging across these curb cuts is one aspect of it. You can go to the next slide. So what this diagram is showing is really the pedestrian flow, very accessible, in every case accessible, in every case safe, and the goal is also to make it an enjoyable pedestrian movement. Along Galen Street, across New Water Street, along the edge of the park, across Water Street and towards Watertown Square. The potential of a green space, kind of thickened green space on the tip of the MBTA lands. As well, going the other direction on Water Street towards Nonantum to the south, a future connection across the Phase 2 project, and then a connection across Water Street to the Charles River Bikeway. And then within of course, on Galen Street are pedestrian sidewalks, one of them connecting to the entry to the building. And then the sloping park, which we're bridging 27 feet in this location. So it was important for us to provide both a direct route for everyone, for able-bodied people. So the bottom part of this is a fairly direct staircase, but also a very enjoyable, accessible route that can also be used by all. So the idea is to make this a place of connection, but also a place of pause. Okay, next slide. So to go over I'll talk about the specific elements when we talk about each project, but as mentioned previously, it's over an acre of open space. Part of this, the public park, part of this, the publicly accessible sloping park. And I think it's worth mentioning again that publicly accessible sloping park is covering the parking garage. So it's somewhat like Post Office Square in downtown Boston. You don't know that the parking is there. Also importantly is the wide and shaded sidewalks along the project. So we can move to the next slide, Tim. So to talk about the elements of the sloping park, I'm going to start with number 7 at the top, which is a small pocket park. And this pocket park, it's at the south of the building, doesn't have to be used as part of the larger park. It's a way where you can just pull right off Galen Street, have a coffee, sit down. It again has 2 different ways into it. From the lower side, a direct sloping, well, actually almost not even sloping, a direct connection into the little pocket park, and then a few stairs from the upper side. We still carry on at a fairly flat route to the number 7, which is a mini plaza, mini sitting area within the park. And then in the corner, another one that has direct access, another little plaza that has direct access to the inside of the building. So what we're trying to do is sort of take advantage of where people are to try to activate the park as much as possible. And then throughout the park, a number of small little pockets of sitting areas that can be used, can and will be used at any time by anyone, as well as built-in at number 8, and sort of built-in seating steps within the lawn, and you'll see it. I mean, this is facing out towards the Charles River, so the potential of the view is pretty beautiful. And then I think I think we've gone through this already. The direct connection down the staircase, and then the sloping walk connection. And by sloping walk, I mean it's actually less steep than a ramp. So just to give a little bit of visualization of what this feels like, this is the Pocket Park just off Galen Street at the top. You can see, you know, it gives a sense of the scale of it with the tables and chairs and people sitting there. I also wanted to note on this view the beginning of the streetscape. And the idea is that this would be really helping to start establish the character of the pedestrian realm along Galen Street. And the path that starts to invite you a little bit further in down the sloping walkway, but you'll start to see the view actually right at this park right now because it's a break in the urban fabric. To give a little bit of a key, the elements, and I've sort of talked about this a little bit, you can see the staircase is fairly direct throughout. We wanted to give a little bit of a sense of a meander, of encourage the experience of nature within even the most sort of direct route through. When we were looking at the different ideas for the scheme, this is one that we kind of came up with. We called the chutes and ladders scheme because it reminded us a little bit of that child game, that there's ways to, a number of different ways to move up, both up the staircases and up the sloping walkways. But just to point out again the elements, the upper patio, which is the first one that you encounter, the corner patio right tucked into the corner of the building, and then the number of seating pockets throughout, the seats in the lawn space itself, and then the streetscape at the bottom. And again, this is a view from the corner patio, which gives a sense of kind of the meander of the space, the meander of the park. Looking from the lower end up, where you can see some of the seating steps within the lawn. And then a view of the park from, I guess we're hovering in a drone at this point, looking directly out at the park, but it gives a sense of the overall scale. And a couple of images about the potential planting strategy. One idea is to use birch trees as one element because of the character in the winter as well as in the summer. The bark has such a nice distinctive character. While we won't be having that many seating steps in the top right image, it gives you a sense of the type of seating that we're thinking of. Things that could be occupied by one person. You can sit in between the steps or on top of the steps. And then a predominantly natural planting palette with flowering understory trees and potentially sort of pollinator or other native flowering perennials. So the neighborhood park is something that we're excited to hear input on, as well as the sloping park, of course. But because we haven't taken the neighborhood park to the same level of specificity intentionally. To talk about the elements that we have included in it, first of all, is a hardscape terrace space at the corner of New Water Street and Galen, but tucked a little bit off the street, buffered a little bit with trees and with planting. The park, there's not as dramatic a slope between Galen Street and Water Street, but there still is a slope. So we're taking advantage of that to create safe, but also spaces that feel a little bit somewhat sheltered. So within the lawn, the number 2 area, this is actually kind of the lawn will be shaped and sculpted in order to provide places to sit, but also to be used in, for Frisbee, for different activities, just a large open lawn space. Number 3 shows where the 2 bus shelters would be located. And while we want it to have a very direct connection to the park, we also want to buffer the park in some way from the bus stop. So having them work in a in a synthetic way, the activity, again, the activity of both, of someone waiting for the bus, also helps enhance the enjoyable quality of the park. Number 5 indicates a location of a potential location of a blue bike station. We will have a blue bike station in the site, and this is a potentially likely location for it. And then within number 4, more of a planted area that will also contain smaller scale seating areas. And I'll give a couple of images to just give a taste of what the feel of that space might be. So the bottom left image, which is just in front of the aquarium, gives a sense of the type of plaza with tree planting as well as a trellis. Give a sense of what that space might feel like. These images give a sense of what that lawn might feel like when it starts to take advantage of the slope. And in the back on the bottom right, you can see an image of what a potential demonstration rain garden might look like. So this is an element we might also include in the park, not handling a lot of water, but enough that we start to understand how the landscape actually performs and helps to clean rainwater. And then the corner, which we're calling the meander, where the paths are moving in a couple of different directions, is an area where we could potentially shape the land, include different types of planting, but also have some smaller scale seating areas. And the planting, which is something we're just starting to work on, but the idea is to use the native New England landscape as an inspiration for it. Move to the. So I did want to talk about the streetscape a little bit, and I think this is the last item in the landscape. As Tim pointed out, originally there are places where the sidewalk is currently 6 feet. So knowing that this project will help establish the character of the landscape along Galen Street, we want to provide significant space for pedestrians, but also significant and well thought out growing conditions for shade trees, so that they can grow to their full stature and height and breadth. So the overall width of this area, and this is directly across from the retail space, is about 15 feet, of which 4.5 feet is for permeable paving and structural soil, and more than 10 feet pedestrian zone. And you can see the direct connection between indoor and outdoor in this location. Moving a little bit further up the street, there is where we're directly associated with some interior office or lab functions. There's the potential of including a planted edge to make both to make pedestrians feel comfortable as well as the inside. And that planted edge could also be bumped up a little bit to provide a seating bench along its corner. So places to move, places to pause. And then at that southern edge where the building steps back, it steps back both in plan and in section, it provides an even wider connection for pedestrians. The walkway along the street, but then this is a cut through that sloping connection to the pocket park at the top. And not to forget Water Street. Again, this is also a wide pedestrian realm that with street tree planting, and in this case where we have the opportunity planting on trees on one side and a planted buffer on the other side. So we haven't selected the specific type of street tree, and we will so in association with the forestry division in Watertown. They will be proven shade trees that grow to significant stature, such as these 2 oaks as potential species. And finally, to return to this view that I think gives a good sense of of kind of a medium scale of the tree, not a final scale by any means, but the greenscape along the street, and then this inviting kind of pocket to the sloping the sloping park beyond. And now I'll hand it over to Tim and Jeff to talk about mobility.
Thank you, Shauna. So as we've talked about, one of the goals of this project is really thinking about how we can benefit the community that is around it. We know that traffic today is a significant issue in this area, the backups that occur on traffic on Galen Street, especially at the intersection of Galen and Nonantum. So our team has started by asking the question, how can new transit-oriented development actually improve traffic flow, improve safety, and promote multimodal transportation? So not just mitigating the impacts of the project, but actually creating a better traffic situation than exists today after the project is built. And so I'll turn it over to Jeff Dirk from Vaness, the project's traffic engineer, to talk more about our transportation design.
So thank you, Tim, and good evening to everyone. And I know I can see some of the questions popping up, and a lot of them are directly related to this topic. So I'm going to go through kind of a summary of the transportation study and the findings of the study. And certainly I can imagine there'll be a lot of questions about it that we can certainly go through later on in the presentation itself. I think it's very important as you look at the presentation as it's kind of unfolding, what you do see is that it's the location of this project site, it couldn't be more advantageous to really encouraging alternative modes of transportation. This is a transit-oriented development, and we really couldn't be much closer to Watertown Yards if we wanted to. And so what you see in all of the design features that have been put together, including the park, including the layout of the building, is it's really embracing these alternative modes of transportation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've developed a project in an improvement program that is specifically designed to reduce the impact of this project, but I think more importantly, to address existing congestion and safety concerns that exist in the area. So we're coupling this project with planned improvements that are being undertaken by others, but also improving upon those. And I'll talk about each one of those elements. And I think very importantly, at the outset is to have a project and a specific use on this site that in and of itself is a low traffic generator. Laboratory buildings, by their very nature, have a lot of bench type of lab space in there. And so on a per square foot basis, they're not a significant generator of traffic to start with. So we're starting with a use that fits very well at this site, given the traffic congestion that exists in the area. And so it gives us something to build upon itself. So the ways that we're addressing existing conditions in the area, improving upon those, and then getting the project to fit into those, really start with both physical improvements, demand management measures, and then again, embracing public transportation, pedestrian and bicycle accommodations in the area. So the first thing in terms of the summary of the transportation conclusions of the study is that the project with its improvements, we have developed an improvement program that will improve the levels of service at Galen Street and Nonantum intersection. So levels of service is just a industry terminology to mean that we're able to reduce motorist delays in vehicle queuing at that location. And that really is a linchpin to getting across the river and into Watertown Square. And so that's a significant improvement that we're going to be undertaking as a part of this project. The other key piece of this, and I'll talk about this in a little more detail, is what's known as adaptive traffic signal systems. So this is a state-of-the-art type of traffic control technology that allows for the traffic signals to operate in an intelligent manner. So they're collecting information, they're processing that information, and they're adjusting the way that the signal systems operate in real time to be able to make sure that they accommodate traffic flows as they exist on the roadway. It's not operating on like a time clock system. This is adaptive, so that it means by its very definition that it's responsive. The second thing is, or the next thing is really this public transportation type of improvement. And you saw this again in the design of the building as well as the park, that what we're doing is improving bus access to this area. And we're improving it not only by adding bus stops, but we're also improving it by improving transit times through this area. And the way that we're improving transit times is creating what's known as a queue jump. So what that is it allows the buses to get to the head of the queue when there's a backup of traffic, and then to move given priority over vehicles. So that's very important to not only improve these transit times, but also from the standpoint of encouraging more people to use public transportation. I mentioned transportation demand management. We'll talk about that later on in the presentation as well. And that is a series of measures to encourage the employees of this project to use alternative modes of transportation. And I will say that of all the projects that I've worked on in this area, and a significant number of projects in Watertown, this project is probably the most significant commitment to transportation demand management measures. In fact, a financial commitment to encouraging their employees to use both public transportation as well as bicycle mode of transportation in the area. You heard Tim mention early on in the presentation that we are providing an extensive amount of bicycle parking within the project itself that exceeds the zoning requirements, but also those blue bike stations that you heard Shauna talk about. So those will be open to neighborhood residents as well to be able to have those kind of short-term use of bicycles in the area. So those will be directly located at this project site and at the park itself. And then we also have improvements that are related to the neighborhood, and I'll talk about those because we do know that cut-through traffic, specifically along Aldrich Road, is a concern, not only on Aldrich, but also the other residential streets. So there is a component of this project that looks at addressing those concerns and making sure that this project isn't going to induce additional cut-through traffic, because we know that that's also a very significant concern, and we want to make sure we address that as well. The next slide, please, Dan. So getting more into the mechanical aspects of the traffic study, and I won't get into a lot of detail on the means and methods of it, but I think very important, the constant theme that you've been hearing is we've been working in a very cooperative manner with town staff. And from my standpoint in the transportation engineer for the project, what that means is that very early on in the process, we meet with the town, Department of Public Works, Department of Community Planning, to make sure that as we're conducting this transportation study, that it's addressing the needs of the town, in that we're looking at the critical intersections, we're looking at the modes of transportation that are important, and that we're understanding the town's goals with respect to the transportation improvements in the area, but also other projects. And those projects are specifically implementing improvements and making sure that we understand what those improvements are and include those in our analysis. And I think importantly, how can we build upon those improvements? The transportation study, and again, it's a transportation study because it looks at all modes of transportation. So we're looking at traffic volumes, pedestrian and bicycle accommodations, and public transportation services. So it's a holistic view of the transportation system that's in the area. And I think very important now in the times that we're in is that the data collection that was undertaken, that is the basis of the transportation study, was all taken pre-COVID. So these were, the data was collected during pre-COVID conditions, normal traffic flows, schools were in regular session, so it was not impacted by the conditions that we have now. So the data, the underlying data is valid, and hopefully reflects a condition that we might get back to at some point, or some level of normalcy as well. I mentioned the Comprehensive Transportation Improvement Program. We'll get into that a little bit later on in the presentation as well, but it couples physical improvements, transportation demand management, and then specific safety improvements as well. Another important piece of the transportation study is not you believing what I have to say with respect to the overall conclusions of the study or the benefits that the study has, but that the town has undertaken a peer review. So they've hired one of my peers, essentially, independently to review the means, methods, and overall findings of the transportation assessment. And that review has been conducted. They had some comments. We responded to those comments, which we think resulted in a much better and more robust improvement program for the project. But the key thing is the findings of that peer review is that with the improvements that we are planning to undertake as a part of this project, traffic flow will be improved, safety will be enhanced, and that there will be additional pedestrian and bicycle connections and improved public transportation access. So I think, again, it's not just me saying it. We've had this independently reviewed by a consultant selected by the town, and they've come to the same conclusion. And then lastly, probably not lastly, but probably most important, is that when we're implementing these improvements, what we don't want to do is have it create unintended consequences. And from the neighborhood standpoint, as we looked at it, the unintended consequences would be anything that we would implement that would induce additional cut-through traffic. So these improvements include specific elements that have been designed to reduce cut-through traffic along Aldrich Road and certainly not to encourage it. Next slide, Tim. So this slide shows the study area that we evaluated in the transportation assessment. And I'll just explain a little bit why you see some of the intersections are not bolded and some are bolded here. So our original scope of work that the town had asked us to look at included 15 intersections, including Watertown Square. You see a number of intersections along Galen Street. We also looked at intersections along Water Street and Nonantum Road as well. So it's a very encompassing study. But as a result of the initial review of the study, a significant portion of this traffic, as you might imagine, is going to be oriented to and from the Massachusetts Turnpike. So that those vehicles will be getting off the Turnpike in Newton and then traveling north on Galen to get to the project site. So there was a request that we look at intersections beyond the project site extending into Newton as well, just to understand how the project might interact with conditions that exist in that area as well. And so that's where you see the additional intersections that are in bold that were added to the study area. The other important thing I want to point out on this slide is you do see the phase 1 and phase 2 shown in the different colors here in terms of the buildings. What was very important in conducting the transportation study and specifically relating to the improvements that we're planning to do was that we included traffic from both the phase 1 building and the phase 2 building. And the reason for that was to make sure that as we implement improvements, that it would accommodate both phases of the project themselves. So from the standpoint of the phase 1 building, we'd be creating additional capacity. So that's a good thing in terms of improving traffic flow in the area, because when the phase 1 building gets built, it's going to be designed to accommodate the traffic from phase 2 as well, which will not be there at the completion of phase 1. And so you will see, again, added capacity. But the important part of that is we want to try to build it once and have it work for both phases of this project. Next slide, Tim, please. So I see some questions popping up about pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and bicycles in particular. And so again, transportation assessment, that is a very important piece of what we look at for the project. It's not only the connectivity and the relationship of this project to the existing pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, but it's also looking at safety and I think importantly, looking at where there are gaps and where these gaps can be filled or improved. And so as you look at this slide here, what this is showing is where there are existing sidewalks, where there are crosswalks, where there are signals that allow for pedestrians to push a button and cross the intersection. And then you see in green where we're showing where the bicycle paths and the shared use paths are along the Charles River. And one of the things as you look at this, and what was very striking to us as well, is looking at Aldrich Road, what we have for accommodations there, and then looking at Water Street and the connections to the Charles River. And you see there's a missing link there, and the missing link is Water Street. So we spent a significant amount of time understanding how we can complete that connection, and not only complete the connection, but do it in a safe manner so that we have connectivity between the neighborhood all the way over the Charles River. And of course, it benefits the project. It benefits the project from the standpoint of our employees who would also have those connections. Again, getting back to the fact of what we want to achieve is a multimodal project, reduce our traffic demands, reduce the parking demands. These connections are beneficial to the project, they're beneficial to transportation system as a whole, and they're beneficial to the neighborhood. Next slide, Tim. So now looking at the traffic numbers. So again, as I had mentioned, we start with a very low use in terms of traffic generation as kind of a baseline condition. And then this project includes a very robust transportation demand management program that includes a traffic monitoring piece with not only traffic monitoring, but what comes along with the traffic monitoring is we set a goal for a trip reduction. We're required to measure against that trip reduction. And then if we don't achieve it, there's penalties. And those penalties are all basically put to make us achieve the ultimate goal of the trip reduction standard. So what you see in the slide here is the traffic volumes and trip estimates for both the phase 1 project and the phase 2 project. Because again, we analyzed both phases. So essentially the transportation analysis assumes you complete phase 1 and phase 2, and you mitigate the impacts from both of those. So in terms of automobile trips, we're expecting about 70, or the transportation assessment assumes 75% of the traffic or trips generated by both phase 1 and phase 2 would consist of automobile trips. 15% would consist of transit trips, and 10% will be made by pedestrian and bicycle modes of transportation. I will tell you that the 75% automobile share is much higher than what a lab building in Watertown generates. They're typically closer to 60% use, and you will see that in what our travel mode reduction is that we've analyzed and mitigated for a 75% auto mode share, when in reality, and what our TDM program and metrics will achieve is actually a 60% reduction. So any place that we can get down below the 75% automobile usage is a benefit, because that means, again, we've mitigated for a 75% automobile usage project, but we're going to achieve something less than that. So that's a good thing. Next slide, Tim. So transportation demand management, how are we going to achieve this mode share goal of getting ourselves down below that 75%? So we start with a very aggressive transportation demand management program. And the first thing is, you can commit to all these measures, but you need to have a goal. And that goal has got to be something that's set and measured against. And as I said, if you don't achieve the goal, what are you going to do to get yourself in line with that goal? So the mode share goal that's been established for this project is a 60% of the employees driving alone to work. And how are we going to achieve that? Well, first thing is, we're going to have a transportation monitoring program. And that transportation monitoring program is going to check in against this mode share goal. That's done by measuring the parking demands in the garage, the traffic volumes entering and exiting the site, employee surveys as well. So all of that's going to allow us to have a metric that gets reported to the town to document that we're achieving this mode share goal. We will have a full-time on-site transportation coordinator, so they'll be responsible for the implementation of this. Probably the most important thing is we will become, or the project proponent and building owner will become, a member of the Watertown Transportation Management Association. So the transportation coordinator will serve as that go-between between the Transportation Management Association and us being a member of that. Obviously, the project gets all of the benefits that are offered by being a member of the Transportation Management Association. Transportation information, so this is bike routes, where sidewalks are located, public transportation schedules. Those are all going to be made available to employees. And then linking that, if you look directly across that bullet, is transit screens within the building lobbies. So not only are we providing information about what's available for public transportation, the transit screens are being able to tell an employee when a bus is going to be coming, if it's behind schedule, so that what they can do is they can time their leaving of the building to make sure that they're out there with sufficient time to meet the bus. But if it's inclement weather, you can stay inside, maybe work a little bit longer, or stay warm in the building lobby, and you know that a bus is going to be there in a couple minutes, and then you can walk out of the building over to the nice park that you saw and board a bus directly opposite the project site. So it couldn't be any more convenient for public transportation use. I mentioned financial incentives, and again, this is a significant part of the program. We can offer all of these things, but really some employees just need a little bit nudge to be able to make this mode shift. So the first thing that we're doing from a monetary inducement is each employee that uses public transportation, uses a bus, will be eligible for a transportation benefit. That transportation benefit right now is about $90. It's the cost of an unlimited subway or bus pass. So that's a $90 benefit. That will be offered to any employee that is going to use public transportation. So essentially it's free. So you can't have a better inducement to be able to do that mode shift. So again, that's a significant component. It's not only providing these amenities, providing these connections, but there's a financial incentive as well. So there's no money out of your pocket to use public transportation. I mentioned the Blue Bike Station. You've heard that from both Shauna and Tim. Those will be provided directly adjacent to the site. Employees can use those. They're also eligible for use by the residents as well for short-term bicycle usage. And coupled with that, for the employees, if they're going to commute to work by bike, we're going to provide a Blue Bikes membership. Now, that's about a $99 value right now. Again, no money out of pocket to an employee that wants to use the bike share or bike mode to commute to the project site. That $99 benefit, it can also be used for any bicycle related transportation. So if you needed new bike shoes or you wanted to put it to a new bike, that's something that it can be used for as well. It's not just the Blue Bikes membership, but the value of that transportation benefit is set based on what a bike share membership may be. Again, it's to eliminate any barriers that an employee may have to want to be able to commute to the project site by bike. We mentioned as well the secure bicycle parking. Again, we're providing it in excess of what zoning would require to provide that additional inducement. So if you bike to the site, there will be a secure place for you to be able to park your bike outside of the weather. So it's going to be internal to the project site. Next slide, Tim. So what this slide shows, we talked about the mode shift. We talked about the fact that we're designing for a 75% auto usage at this site. What this slide shows here is the distribution of traffic. So that 75% of the vehicles that are going to be arriving at the project site by automobile that we assumed in the traffic study, what you see is it's fairly dispersed in terms of how it arrives at the project site, and that's what's just shown on the slide here. So the way that we come up with this dispersal pattern, it's looking at how people use the transportation network in the town of Watertown. It looks at commuting patterns. It also looks at US Census data for persons that are employed in the town of Watertown. And when you put all of those elements together, you arrive at this trip distribution. So if you're driving in an automobile and you're coming to this project site to work, this is how the traffic would be generally dispersed in the area. And what we really wanted to show on this is just, it is very dispersed. So it's not really concentrated on any one roadway. Obviously, as it gets to the project site, it needs to arrive at the entrance off of Water Street. And so it will concentrate at that location, but outside of that area, it's fairly dispersed. The majority of it is oriented to and from the Massachusetts Turnpike. Next slide, Tim. So now I want to spend some time to talk about the improvements that we're going to be undertaking as a part of this project. And again, these are privately funded, and privately funded means it's being funded as a part of this development. So this development entity and the developer will fund these transportation improvements in coordination with the town as well. So we're building upon some improvements that are also being undertaken. Our firm is designing some of the work that's or improvements that are going to be undertaken along or at Watertown Square. So we're very familiar with what is going to be built in terms of improvements. And so we've been able to take those improvements and then build upon them. So to make them better or expand upon those. So if we start on the north side of the river, there's a couple of improvements that we're going to be undertaking. The first is safety improvements. Watertown Square and some of the intersections in the area there, they are high crash locations from the standpoint of not only motor vehicles, but also pedestrian safety and bicycle safety at that area. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is addressing those safety issues. So there's road safety audits that you might be familiar with have been undertaken in that area. The purpose of the road safety audit is to have the community, the municipality, and other professionals look at what is taking place from the standpoint of motor vehicle crashes at the intersections, and then developing a series of improvements, recommendations for improvements to be undertaken at those locations. So we will be undertaking those improvements at those locations, and the primary focus is on pedestrians and bicycles because we're going to improve traffic flow, but those vulnerable roadway users, which are pedestrians and bicycles, the improvements for safety that we'll be undertaking will be specifically focused on pedestrian and bicycle modes at those locations. So those are, if you look at the slide that's here, you see the purple lines and the red line, or I'm sorry, the purple lines and the blue lines. So we got purple lines on the north side of the river, a couple of blue lines on the south side, primarily along Watertown Street. We will be undertaking pedestrian and bicycle focused improvements for safety at those locations. The other thing is that adaptive traffic signal system. So you see that here in the red lines that you see pointing at Watertown Square and the signalized intersections both at Galen, Nonantum, Water Street, extending across the river. So all of those traffic signals will be installing what's known as that adaptive traffic signal system. So what that means is you have existing traffic signals that are there today, but what they lack is sensors to be able to measure the amount of traffic that's arriving and the amount of traffic that leaves the intersection. By measuring entering and exiting volumes, or the volume of traffic that's processed by the traffic signals, that allows those signals to not only communicate with each other, they can tell each other how much traffic is going to be arriving on the next green light, and also how much traffic is being processed by the intersection. By looking at volume arriving and volume processed, if the volume arriving does not equal the volume processed, then that means that you have a queue that happens because you didn't get through the light. The signal didn't process the amount of traffic that's arriving. And so the sensors allow the signal to understand that, and then what it can do is adjust its timing to be able to account for the flows that are arriving, process it through it, and then allow the next traffic signal downstream to have the same information so that it can make a similar adjustment. The implementation of that adaptive traffic signal system, both through the analysis that we've done as well as the peer review consultant, it's been concluded that that will result in improved traffic flow in this area. And not only improved traffic flow, but a reduction in vehicle queuing. And so that, coupled with some physical improvements that we're going to do, the conclusion is your overall travel time through this area will be improved, delays will be reduced, and vehicle queues will be reduced as well. So now we're going to go on the south side of the river, focus a little bit closer into where the project site itself is located. So we are making substantial improvements at the Water Street Nonantum Road intersection, specifically related to the Watertown yards. And I'm going to have a slide to talk about that in a minute. So we are making some improvements there that are directly related to the improvements we're doing at Aldrich Road. So you've seen a series of slides that talk about the realignment of the intersection. I'm going to have another slide that shows that as well. So I'm going to go through in more detail on that slide, both the improvements that we'll be doing at the Nonantum, Water Street, Galen Street intersection, as well as the installation of the traffic signal. But we'll describe the bus lanes, we'll describe the installation of the traffic signal, how that will operate. And then what you see in green here is specific improvements along Aldrich Road, and then at the other end at Nonantum Road that we're planning to implement to, again, reduce the volume of cut-through traffic that exists today, but certainly not encourage additional cut-through traffic as well. So we've spent a fair amount of time understanding the traffic flows in that area, and then targeting specific improvements to address those potential, the existing concerns, and to reduce any potential for added cut-through traffic in the area. You can go to the next slide, Tim. So going back to the Galen Street, Nonantum Road, Water Street intersection, we spent a lot of time recently, past several months, working with the town and the MBTA on Watertown yards, both from the standpoint of improving operations at that intersection, but also bus accommodations and accessibility in this area. So what we wanted to show in this slide here, and I know those of you in the neighborhood are very familiar with the fact that you have a number of curb cuts, and Shauna went through this as well. These curb cuts that are on the approach or as a part of the traffic signal coming out of the Watertown Yard, in order to allow for those buses to circulate, it really creates congestion at the intersection. It adds a signal phase to the intersection that's trying to process a lot of traffic going over to Watertown Square as well as returning. So we add a signal phase that just induces delay by itself. And then you have safety concerns related to these multiple curb cuts. And you can see just from the standpoint of the way those sidewalks, the crosswalks line up there, it's not a pedestrian friendly environment at all. Just having to cross all of those multiple curb cuts with buses, the traffic on Galen Street, it's very intimidating is probably an understatement. And so we've been working to address that and improve the traffic flow as well. Next slide, Tim. So this is the plan that you had seen earlier, but I'm going to talk about it from the standpoint of pedestrian and bicycle safety, bus access, and traffic flow. So the first thing I want to talk about is the bus access in the area. So very important, we talked about queue jump lanes. The way that that works is we're installing a dedicated bus lane, so a separated bus lane that will run along the frontage of this project, extend up to the new traffic signal that we're going to install at the Aldrich Road intersection, proceed through the intersection, and then you see it wraps around to provide access to a bus stop, as well as to allow for buses to recirculate within Watertown Yard. The installation of this traffic signal coupled with this bus lane allows for the MBTA to close the curb cuts that exist at the Galen Street, Nonantum, Water Street intersection. That's a very significant improvement to allow for traffic to flow through that intersection safely. We're eliminating the signal phase, so delays are reduced, queues are reduced. Importantly, as a pedestrian or bicyclist, you don't have all those curb cuts that you're going to drive by as you're trying to negotiate with traffic and through that area there. So it's a significant operational and safety improvement. And that's a direct result, or one of the reasons we're able to do it is because of this bus lane and because of the traffic signal. So again, with the bus lanes, as they circulate around, you also see a bus lane opposite the project site, parallel or adjacent to the park itself. So that serves as a queue jump lane as well. Buses will be able to come right out up to the traffic signal, not have to mix with the traffic that's waiting at the traffic signal, and they can make a right-hand turn, proceed into the bus lane, continue along Galen Street, recirculate into the bus yard. If they're making a left-hand turn, which you saw the 4 buses that go by the project site itself, they can use the bus lane, merge into traffic at the traffic signal, make a left-hand turn by way of a traffic signal onto Galen Street. So it improves bus operations by having the dedicated bus lane, the access to the traffic signal. All of those will improve transit access in this area, improve access to Watertown Yard, and it also benefits the flow of traffic along Galen Street. From a pedestrian standpoint in this area, you see new sidewalks being introduced. Both Shauna and Tim had spoken about the generous sidewalks that will be provided along the frontage of the project site. So that's going to improve, the pedestrian experience. We will have a traffic signal at Aldrich Road that will have pedestrian push buttons and a separate signal phase. So if you want to be able to cross the street, you no longer need to walk down to the Nonantum intersection. You can do a direct crossing here. New sidewalks will be installed along Water Street. So if you're coming from the neighborhood, you push the push button, you cross the street, you can walk on a new sidewalk and get all the way down Water Street and connect over to Nonantum. And at the Water Street Nonantum intersection, what we're planning to do is install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. So you cross at a signalized intersection here, you walk down Water Street. When you get to Nonantum, you push a push button, the flashing yellow lights will be activated there, and then you cross over into the parkway system. So it's a safe, convenient pedestrian connection. And if you remember back to that screen or the slide that I had showed early on in the presentation, it fills that missing gap. So that missing gap of connectivity between the neighborhood and the Charles River Parkway system is now complete, and you don't need to cross over into Watertown Square to get to the connections there or go through the Galen, Nonantum, Water Street intersection. Now you'll have a direct connection on a low volume road, a crossing of Galen Street by way of a traffic signal. So it improves that connection, improves safety. The same is being done for bicyclists. So bicyclists, you can see it's probably very faint on this slide here, but the intent is that we have a shared use roadway. So Aldrich Road would be marked with shared use bicycle symbols. You'd be able to cross at the signalizer crossing. The traffic signal that's going to be installed at this location will have bicycle detection. So if you're a bicyclist and you pull up to the stop line, the traffic signal will actually detect you and call for a green light so that you'll be able to proceed through the intersection over onto Water Street, and then you can continue along Water Street and get over to the trail system. Bicyclists will also, we are designing the ramps at Nonantum so that a bicycle can use the ramp there, get up onto a protected sidewalk, push the push button, and then cross over into the trail system itself. So again, it provides that missing gap without the need to continue along Galen Street for neighborhood connectivity over to the Charles River. Benefits the project as well because it provides that connectivity for the inducement of pedestrian and bicycle activity at the site. Now, looking at the traffic signal itself, again, a primary focus of what we want to do is not encourage additional traffic to use Aldrich Road to travel between Watertown Street and Nonantum Road. So the way that we're doing it is the traffic signal, if you're coming from Aldrich Road, you're still going to be able to make left and right-hand turns. You will not be able to go straight through the intersection. So we're not eliminating any movements that exist today, but we're also not providing a direct connection for you to be able to go straight through the intersection and then proceed out on Water Street and get to Nonantum Road. The same thing coming back. So if you're coming by the project site, you come up to the traffic signal, it's left turn only. You cannot go straight through. Both buses and general traffic will make left turns there. Buses can make right turns from their bus lane, but general traffic cannot go straight through the intersection. So again, it eliminates that potential for that connection to actually take place. The other thing is you look at where we'll call it Old Water Street, where the bus lanes are, which you see at that side of the park, is that anyone that's coming down at that intersection, buses will be able to enter that Old Water Street leg. General traffic will not. That's bus only right turn to get into that area there. General traffic, if you want to make a right-hand turn and you're coming down Old Water Street past the park, you'll go past the park, travel along Watertown Yard, come out to Galen Street where you see the little island on the left-hand side of the slide and make your right-hand turn there. So again, what that does is we're not focusing traffic down at Aldrich Road. If you want to get to Nonantum, and you come up Aldrich, you're going to have to make a left-hand turn, travel past Watertown Yard to Nonantum and make a right-hand turn there. The other component in terms of reducing cut-through traffic is traffic calming along Aldrich Road. So one of the things you heard Shauna talking about, working with the neighborhood about the park, what we'll be doing is also working with the neighborhood to install traffic calming or select traffic calming devices to be installed along Aldrich Road, which we've committed to designing and constructing as a part of this project. So we construct a series of traffic calming measures along Aldrich Road with the intent being that we're going to slow or calm the traffic down as it's along Aldrich Road. And the goal of all of this, the traffic calming coupled with the improvements at the traffic signal, the restricted movements, is to really say to anybody, if you do not have a destination in the neighborhood, there's no reason for you to be traveling along Aldrich Road. You should be staying on Watertown Street, coming up to Galen Street at Nonantum and going straight through the intersection or making a left-hand turn to go to Watertown Square, but not using Aldrich Road because there's going to be no advantage to you doing that. In fact, your travel time will be longer than if you just stayed on Watertown Street. And so that's the goal and focus of coupling the turn restrictions at Aldrich with some traffic calming measures, neighborhood-focused traffic calming measures on Aldrich Road. So next slide, Tim. I think that might be the conclusion. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Jeff. So as we finish up, we've talked about a lot of the details of the project. We just wanted to pull back out and talk about some of the basic principles that inform how the team approaches each decision. And that's really a commitment to sustainability and wellness. We know we're all meeting remotely tonight because of COVID. We'd all rather be in person meeting with you. But even after we go back to normal, what we've been through the last 6 months, the COVID pandemic is going to change how people use buildings. And that's something that we're thinking about in the design of this building, providing a comfortable, healthy environment, reducing touch points, and also ensuring good indoor air quality for building tenants. Sustainability is also, it has informed each design the team has made. From the infiltration of stormwater, and that's something we haven't talked about, but the project is infiltrating 100% of the stormwater on the site, and that's going to take place underneath the neighborhood park and underneath the eastern edge of sloping park here. So from the infiltration of stormwater to the irrigation water, 100% of there's extensive plantings on the site, but 100% of the irrigation water is going to be stormwater that we collect on the roof, store in a tank, and then use to irrigate both of these parks. So we won't be using potable water for that. High performance building envelope, including solar shading on the west and south elevation, high performance mechanical equipment, and then of course the on-site generation of renewable energy. And because of that, we are committing to exceed the town's requirement for LEEDs, creating a LEED Silver certifiable building, and are committing to LEED Gold. So just in summary, this is just a list of the broad range of ways that the project is benefiting the community around it. I won't go through each one, but there's a number here: economic, environmental, and experiential benefits. We look forward to discussing more with you. So thank you all for your time. We know this has been a lot to get through, and we appreciate your patience. We look forward to discussing and taking your questions. I also wanted to we look forward to going through those at this meeting. And we'll also, our full team will be here on October 8th, a week from tonight as well, to continue the discussion. So I'm now going to turn it back over to Alan, who's going to introduce the Q&A session.
Great. Thanks, Tim. And thanks, team, for that. There's been a minor change in how we're going to be using the Q&A. Some of you may seen me mention it in chat. Instead of using the Q&A box down below in Zoom, which is a great feature, we're instead going to be using the chat. And for all of you who have submitted those questions, rest assured I've seen them, and we do get an archive of those questions, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. The first one I'd like to get to is Bruce Gellerman, because Bruce entered a question into the comment as well as raising his hand. So Bruce, what I'd like to do is ask you to take yourself off mute and share your question verbally. If you'd rather not, we can just read it out loud. It's entirely up to you.
Well, thank you. Some of the questions have been answered, some parts of it, but I'm still not satisfied because the problems from Pleasant Street traffic, moored traffic from Arsenal and the Arsenal Mall project, Watertown Mall, all that, the movie theaters, the restaurants, is going to create incredible stress on the Watertown Square line. And I don't think these kind of remedial methods are going to deal with that. We're going to have traffic coming off the pike. It's going to be, I don't think this is going to handle it. And I'm wondering if you've thought of more dramatic things like a tunnel under the Charles or something like that, because that intersection is never going to be safe, and it's never going to be able to handle the increased flow of traffic in the future. Thanks very much. I appreciate this. Things like a tunnel under the Charles or something like that.
I don't know which member of the project team would like to address that or comment on that.
Well, I think I can just respond to some of it. You know, I understand the concerns that have been raised. I will say, from the standpoint of developing the improvement program and assessing the impact of the project itself, we do include traffic from all of those other projects as a part of the traffic analysis. So as we're designing these improvements and thinking about the changes in the traffic patterns that will happen, we are considering the full build out of everything. So all of the projects that you had mentioned, we're including as well. But I think the key thing, and I think this is part of what you're hinting on, to some extent, we're not going to be able to build our way out of all of this because, there's only so much widening of roadways and things like that you can do. And it starts to have a detrimental impact. And what you see in the detrimental impact is those safety issues, and specifically those vulnerable users. So as we're widening intersections, what it's doing is obviously, it makes it more difficult for pedestrians to cross, makes it more difficult for bicycles in the area. So what we're trying to do is really couple a balanced approach, and the balanced approach is, let's improve traffic, improve the flow of traffic, but also trying to have a project that has specific measures to reduce its traffic demands, so that what we're doing is addressing concerns that are in the area, improving traffic flow, but not introducing a project that's going to overburden the situations that exist out there today.
Okay. Before we get to the next section of questions, I just want to reiterate how we're going to be doing this. So for those of you who are joining late or missed the slide, we'll be using the chat for text-based questions and answers instead of the Q&A. There's also should be a hand raise. It looks like a little high five down below. That's how you signal to us you want to raise a hand and ask a verbal question. And whether it's text-based or verbal, just ask to keep your question or comment to one at a time. If you have more, that's great. We'd love to hear from you. We just want to give everyone a chance to cycle through. And before we jump to the next text-based question, because at the moment I don't see any hands raised, I just want to make note that we have got several members of the City Council and some members of the city staff in the audience. So if you would like to come off mute and share any comments or questions, we certainly invite you to do so. But seeing no hands raised at the moment, I'll proceed to the next question that we have in our chat. And that's from Chris to the team.
Alan, I'm sorry, this is Lisa Feltner.
Hi, Lisa.
If I could just interrupt. Hi,
yes, please.
Thanks
Hi.
for acknowledging our presence. I'm going to let the public have this. We don't have enough time, obviously, to address all the questions, so we'll be looking to another meeting. But I and others, I don't have a raised hand, just to let you know. I don't see that option anywhere
It's because sorry, this started as a webinar and got turned, and we're trying to operate a webinar as a, meeting. And so for sometimes the certain features go away. So we're going to have to, I guess, that's why the Q&A wasn't working either. And that's why we had resolved to using the chat. So for hand raising, because everyone is off mute, we're just going to have to, there's no way to determine who gets to speak when. So if you'd like to speak, I invite you to take.
Excuse me, it's Gideon. Someone just sent in, and I forgot this function, but if you pull up your participant list, you can raise your hand on that.
I'm just letting you know. I'm sorry, Gideon, you're garbled on my end, and I don't want to
Sure.
hijack the meeting, but I'm just letting you know there is no option for raise hand, and I'm not the only one, so I'm just letting you know that is not possible.
Lisa, this is Jody Zussman. If you go to the participants and double click on that, at the very bottom of the participants, you'll see it says raise hand.
That's not on my screen. I only have an invite with a list of attendees. Usually there is a raise hand. I know I've done Zoom before.
Yes, it's because I brought you in as a panelist as opposed to keeping people as attendees because of the way we modified the meeting. There are a few people who are raising their hands, so I know it's working in some fashion.
Okay, just other people have put in the chat that they can't do it either, so I was just letting you know, and I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay. Gideon, just to confirm, your audio was garbled, but we did hear what you had to say, so thank you for chiming in there. So for everyone who's a panelist, as Jody was mentioning a moment ago, you should be able to scroll to the bottom of your list. I have a different view than you all do, so I don't quite get to see that, but it should be there, and you can raise hands that way. I'd like to get to the next text-based question before we take some hands raised, because I want to try to go back and forth, if that's okay. So the next text-based question I have from the order received was from Chris, and that is, will the parking garage be open to the public or building tenants only?
Yeah, I can take that. Thanks for your question, Chris. We've been considering opening to the public in off hours, weekends, storm nights. So that's being evaluated right now. Just we need to make certain on, like security, things like that for non-tenants. So it would be, tenant only during the week, Monday through Friday, typical office hours. And we're evaluating the nights and weekends. I think it's something we'd like to accommodate if we can.
Great, thank you, Bob. We'll go to Maria. Maria, with your hands raised, you can take yourself off mute and share your comment or question, please. Maria, looks like your microphone's open, but for some reason we can't hear you.
That's a good question.
Hello? Oh, did you say that's a good question? If so, that we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I was wondering why it wasn't working. I wanted to say that thank you for the presentation. I see a lot of very interesting and things that will improve that area. I really have quite a few questions, and I don't want to take up all the time, but I'd like to know if at the next meeting, for example, we're going to really focus on the traffic in terms of bicycle and pedestrian access, because I do have a lot of questions in that area. I also wanted to talk about the Pocket Park and the other park. I was really enthused that you're comparing it to Post Office Square, because that's a lovely area. And there are many things that we could do that will make this also very helpful. And I also want to talk about the blue bikes, and in terms of pedestrian access, I'm very concerned about both because I think that given that Harvard Square is not that far, there will be a lot of blue bikes coming in from Harvard Square and trying to go down our very favorite Mount Auburn Street and trying to get across the river. I think we have to look at how we get across the river given the amount of traffic. There's just, I don't even know. I've got so many questions that I want to make sure that get addressed. Everything about bike lockers and bike showers, because if you're wanting to increase number of cyclists and year-round cyclists, given its location, you've got to have a place to change and keep your shorts, so to speak. The crossing at Nonantum and Water Street concerns me. That's just a very fast area. Are we going to have more time to go through all of these things at our next meeting, or how are this going to be addressed?
Well, I can partially answer that. Yes, to your question, we will take time at the next meeting to answer any questions that you have. We'll attempt to answer some of the points that you raised tonight. And I think what I'll do is I'll let Tim speak to kind of the bike locker area and what we've designed and how that will accommodate. I don't have universal answers for all the subjects, but if we could bite off one at a time, and perhaps Tim can weigh in on the bike locker and storage area and the blue bikes.
Sure. So thank you for your question. We agree completely that it's important to think about not just the storage of bikes, but how people arrive and their needs after arriving. The bike storage room, as we mentioned, will have 45 bike parking spaces. That'll be both post-mounted racks and wall racks, and designed to accommodate different bikes as well. We know there's an increase in the usage of cargo bikes, for example, and so we'll have spaces to accommodate those as well for someone that may drop the children off in the morning and then come to the building. We'll also have in that same area approximately 50 lockers, and then we have dedicated shower rooms for cyclists as well. They're all accessible before entering the building lobby.
One of the things that I would like for you to begin to address is the idea of blue bikes there is excellent. It's a perfect place for it. But we're considering the connections to the blue bikes. It'll be going to Harvard Square. It'll be going into Brighton. And both of those are going to be tricky. Getting across Galen Street onto Mount Auburn on a blue bike scares and I'm a cyclist, scares me a great deal, because the blue bikes are heavy. They're not the most maneuverable. So trying to get people across the river on Galen onto Mount Auburn is going to be a challenge. And in the winter, that area does not get plowed really well. The sidewalks are not plowed really well. So people who might want to ride across on the sidewalks will be challenged as well. Going up the other way and going down Nonantum on the bike path there, trying to get across Water Street, that, I have done that. Believe me, I have done that, and it is a challenge. So we're going to have to look at both of the pedestrians and the bicycle access there. I think that the idea of having that much access is really good, because that amount of traffic on Galen Street will be unsustainable. The car traffic on Galen Street today is unbelievable, probably 12 to 14 hours a day, from about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, all the way to almost 7 o'clock at night. And we cannot have more cars. We have to figure out a way to reduce the car traffic into that area, not increase it. So I know that you're planning for less car demand than you were saying, but I think we have to figure out a way to ensure that there is less car demand, that we make sure that we make it easy for people to get from other major transit hubs into this one. This is not the only and the last amount of development that's going to go on to Galen Street.
All right, Maria, thank you so much. We just want to make sure that you got tons of great comments. That's fantastic. There's lots of other people here too.
Sorry.
So I just want to make sure we try to give as much time to everyone to give a chance to either ask a question or give a comment.
I hope we have plenty of time to continue to discuss this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, next text question that came in, and then I'll switch to some hand raising. Actually, next one's a comment, and then I'll get to the next question on text, and then I'll get to Mary. Next question on comment on text, I'll just read it out loud. Just says the majority of traffic on Galen is not the buses, it's cars and trucks. So I just want to read that into the record for everyone to hear in case they didn't see that. Next text question, and then we'll go back to a hand raise. The next question comes from Brooke, and Brooke asks, how long is phase 1 expected to take?
Well, again, I think I can take a stab at that. I think it would take, plan on 2 years, 24 months from the time you get a shovel in the ground, so to speak. Maybe 22 months, you could be doing some tenant improvement work as well, but I think you got to budget 24 months for as a timeline. And David and Tim, if I'm off in any respect, please chime in.
Well, I think that's right, Bob.
Great. Okay. Now we'll flip over to a hand raise, which is Mary. I appreciate your patience. Mary, you should be able to open your mic and ask your question or share your comment.
Alan, thanks. You guys are doing a great job. I just wanted to make one comment. I feel like you did a fabulous job explaining what you've done for Aldridge Road with all the, slowing the traffic down, making the intersection. But what I'm seeing is I have a lot of self-interest in Moore Street. Moore Street is a direct cut through from Watertown Street. And if we're going to make all these improvements to Aldridge Road to try to, to mitigate the traffic there, it seems to me people are just going to like bang a right on Moore Street, not even go down as far as Aldridge Road. So that has me concerned. And I'm also, and as part of that, it looks like Water Street is a one-way in at the bus entrance, but are you expecting a lot of the Mass Pike traffic coming down Galen Street to turn on to the high side of Water Street? Will that still be open to traffic? I mean, I think you said there was 34% traffic coming down from the Mass Pike, and if we get cut through from Moore Street, won't all those people be taking a right on Water Street at the high side of that?
So the water, we're not closing off Water Street. I guess it would be the south end of Water Street. Maybe that's what you're referring to. You could still use that, which I think is a one way towards Nantum, if I remember right. So you could still do that. You could use the new, we'll call it New Water Street, that's going to align opposite Aldridge. You can, if you're coming from the Mass Pike, you can come up to that intersection, make a right-hand turn. So we're not restricting that movement. You will also be able to, if you're coming from Watertown Square, you can come up to the traffic signal, you can make a left-hand turn to go up there as well. The only movement that's not allowed is through movements. It's through movements from Aldrich or through movements coming from the new Water Street. So those are the only movements that are restricted there. So you,
right. That's my point. By restricting those, aren't you just moving that traffic up to Moore Street? And aren't you expecting a lot of the Mass Pike traffic to also I can just see this funnel of traffic going down, if you want to call it the south side of Water Street. So not even bothered to get all the way down past the building where you've done all these lights and all these improvements. It just seems like there's going to be if there's 34% of the cars are coming off the Mass Pike,
right?
It seems to me, why would you go all the way to the square to get to the new Water Street? You would take a right before that, or come out of Aldridge Road and take a right and then have to take a left on Water Street. It just seems like we're causing more traffic up near the Moore Street, Water Street, Hunt Street intersection. So that's my question.
Sure.
Thanks for the great job you're doing.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, so with that, I'm going to switch to a text-based question, then we'll flip back to some raised hands. The next text-based question I have is from Ruth. Actually, it's a comment, excuse me, not a question. So I'll read the comment. I'll read two comments and then we'll get to hand raised. Ruth offers a comment, worried that Upper Water Street by Direct Tire will not be able to handle the increased traffic. People will take that road to get to Lower Water Street, and we all know that road is like a cow path. The next comment, and Jeff, if you want to reply to either one of these or comment, you can, but it's also traffic related. Make a third lane, this is from IMAC 24, make a third lane going from Galen Street north for your dedicated bus lane with a setback to your massive biolab on Galen? So those are two traffic related questions.
In terms of the lower Water Street, I think, you know, that's a road, as you said, by virtue of the way that it is laid out, designed, and functions today, it's probably not going to be a roadway that's going to be heavily used. And the reason is because, as you pointed out, it's not very comfortable driving down it. I've done it several times, and you know, to the extent that I have the ability to come up to a new signalized intersection, which again, we're doing specific improvements to improve the flow of traffic along Galen Street. So at the end of the day, it's actually going to be quicker if you're trying to get to this project site to stay on Galen Street, come down to the new signal, make a right-hand turn, and then enter the parking garage, which is closer to that end of Water Street and Galen Street than it is if you try to maneuver down that narrow road, come down towards Nonantum, negotiate through that kind of one-way configuration that you've got down there, then proceed backtracking on Water Street to get to the project site. So the goal of what we're doing with improvements is to really say, you want to stay on Galen Street if you're trying to reach the project site, not travel through the neighborhood streets and not use the lower Water Street intersection. So that's what we're balancing out here in terms of adding capacity to the roadway.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Now we'll turn to a next raised hand, which is Paula Farina Paulus. If I said that right, hopefully I did. Paula,
Yep,
there you go. Thank you.
okay, hopefully you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. This was a great presentation. I own a couple of properties, one directly on Galen Street and one, the first building on Aldrich Road. So I'm really concerned with traffic, number one. And I won't get too into that because other people have already talked about that, and I'm sure we'll address it. One issue that didn't come up at all was the elimination of all the on-street parking on Galen Street, directly across the street from Farina's and New Ginza and the Archstone building. I understand the reason for wanting the bus lane, but I guess I would like to know where they're going to replace that parking. If there's any place on your site where there will be public parking for people coming from Newton Corner who need to shop at Farina's or New Ginza or any of the other merchants on the street. So if you could address that either now or in a follow-up meeting, that would be appreciated. And my only other comment to Mr. Dirk was, you talked about traffic calming measures along Aldrich Road. When they redid Aldrich Road a few years ago, they eliminated quite a few parking spaces for tenants on the street. And since I own one of the four families, I'm concerned with the parking. So they eliminated quite a few parking spaces, and they put in what we thought were traffic calming measures, meaning there's certain parking on the street on one side of the street, and then as you drive down Aldrich, you can't park on the other side of the street. So I'm not sure what other traffic calming measures they would put in, if it means speed bumps or something else. But if you could also address that issue, that would be really helpful. And I won't take up more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Paula. First of all, with respect to some of the Galen Street parking spaces that would need to be replaced, I guess, with the incorporation of the dedicated bus lane, that's kind of an ongoing thing right now with between the planning and the T that we don't, actually control. I certainly hear where you're coming from and am empathetic to any loss. Of course, I know you've got your business there, but that's something that is ongoing. It's subject to ongoing discussions between the town and the T. We certainly could look into perhaps in the garage, we could investigate some, something, whether it's weekends or off hours. But I do know that with a lot of those curb cuts, even when you remove, there weren't tons of spaces to begin with, given the amount of curb cuts. And it is kind of a dangerous walk, I would say, to, from say up at 88 Galen Street to cross the street, the cars are flying. So empathetic to your plight. We can certainly look into it and discuss it further.
Great, thank you, Bob. Paul also had that question in the text-based chat as well. So with that, we'll assume that that text-based question was the same and got answered. So with that, I'll flip over to the next hand raise, which is Councilor Sedaris. Welcome, and if you take yourself off mute, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I just want to say I want to listen to what everybody has to say tonight, and I appreciate the very well done presentation, and I hope, I see Gideon is on. If you could send this to Gideon so that it's available on the town's website.
Okay, Mark, if you could unmute again. I'm not sure, I think the audio coming from your computer, you might want to lower that.
Sorry.
There you go. Oh, okay.
I would hope that Gideon would be able to put this presentation on the website.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that comment. Okay, go to a text-based comment. This one is a comment from Catherine Armstrong. I'm guessing bicycle riders will be driving once the winter comes. I think that's probably a reference to snow removal. Also, then a question to the team. I think this is aimed at Jeff from Ella Walker to what about a bike lane? I don't know if you want to elaborate more on that than what you covered in the presentation, Jeff.
So there's I think Bob had mentioned, I mean, we're still, the plans that you saw in terms of the design of the bus lane along Galen Street, you know, they're still evolving. What you see is kind of the latest thinking of what that design would look like. And it's certainly not it's not finalized to any extent at all. So we have been having discussions about that, and, you know, whether there's the possibility of having shared use of that bus lane potentially, you know, given, I mean, there is a large number of buses and hopefully going to be more to reduce the amount of traffic in the area there. So that there was some discussion about that. There's also, you know, as the MBTA looks toward the future of what they may want to do with Watertown Yard, and again, the idea of having transit-oriented development in this area is a part of the planning that we've undertaken. It's also looking at whether, as that happens, because as everyone's commented on, there's limited right-of-way along Water Street, so there's only so much that you could actually do within the land that's available there. So the future planning would envision some type of a cycle track or something along that area that would more or less come into play as additional development that happens in that area that frees up some of that land, because again, the public right-of-way is only so wide on that street, so the ability to be able to provide separated bike facilities or even a separate bike lane is very limited. However, with future development, and again, the planning for the traffic signal, the improvements that we're undertaking in the park are all looking towards the potential for having a future cycle track, a separated bikeway, potentially along Water Street, again, with a connection over to the Charles River system.
Great, thank you for that. There was another hand raised, but it has since gone away. It was, if you'd like to raise that hand again, if it went down by mistake, Elodio Thomas, you can please re-raise that. For now, we'll go to the next text-based comment, which it's a comment. I'll read a few comments until we get to the next question from Maria. The cycling traffic in the winter has grown significantly over the last several years. If we make it easier, it will continue to increase. I think we heard something similar to that a moment ago. From Brooke, I do appreciate the reduction in curb cuts, which are scary and unsafe for wheelchair users. Thank you for that comment, Brooke. Elodie, I see your hand went up just a moment ago. Thank you for that. Let me just, a couple of these are really good comments. I just want to make sure they're read into the record so everyone knows what the public is sharing here. Okay, so the next one's a text-based question. So when we flip back to Elodia, hopefully I'm saying your first name correctly. I apologize if I'm not. But
doing fine, Alan.
Floor is yours.
You.
Great, sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Number one, I just want to say I love the sculptural nature of the building, the added greenery, the wide sidewalk. This is a gateway into Watertown Square, and God knows Watertown Square needs some help. My comment about all the transportation stuff, it's very well presented, but having been to so many development meetings over the years, we've heard again and again about all these transportation items, and this developer is going to do this, and this is going to happen here, and this is going to happen there. This is not on you. I think our town needs to have an updated meeting with the community to talk about this development issue in Watertown Square. Because we've heard about iCube money, we've heard about contributions from various developers, And at this point, I don't know who's on first anymore. So it's nothing against what you are planning. We all need to know what is real and what's not real, given all the things we've heard in the past. But bravo, it's a beautiful presentation that you've done. It's very exciting to see the project, and I thank you very much.
Thanks for the comments. Appreciate that. Okay, the next comment we had was from Mary. What is the main access to Water Street from Galen Street? Jeff, I'm not sure if you covered that in detail in one of the previous responses.
So the main access, if we're speaking about the access into the project itself. So if you're looking to enter the project, you would use what we're calling New Water Street. So the leg that is, or the road that will be opposite Aldrich Road. Again, if you're entering from Galen Street, that will allow for left turn movements and right turn movements to enter New Water Street to get to the project site. If you're exiting from the project site, so you'll turn onto Old Water Street. If you want to go to Nonantum, you'll turn right and then proceed towards Nonantum. If you want to come out and get to Galen Street or any of the destinations that would be reached from Galen Street, so you turn left coming out of the parking garage. And then if you want to make a left-hand turn to head towards the Mass Pike, you would use the New Water Street, come out opposite Aldrich and make a left-hand turn. If you want to make a right-hand turn to either proceed down Watertown Street or head over the river into Watertown Square, you would proceed past the park, parallel to Watertown Yards, come out to the intersection with Galen Street, not at the traffic signal, and make a right-hand turn. That leg, which is where Old Water Street is today or thereabouts, will be right turn only for general traffic. So that's how the access would take place. So entering and exiting traffic to the project site would use the New Water Street aligned opposite Aldrich. Exiting traffic would either proceed parallel to Watertown Yards, come to Galen Street and make a right-hand turn, or proceed out to the traffic signal to make a left-hand turn to proceed back towards the Mass Pike.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Also, I just want to clarify, we do have one person dialing in from the telephone. If you would like to raise your hand from the telephone, which you can do to signal us that you'd like to speak, you can press *9. That will tell us you want to raise your hand, and then we can take you off of mute and you can share your comment that way. Just wanted to let you know that. Okay, so seeing no other raised hands at the moment, we'll continue with text-based questions. The next is from Catherine Armstrong. What is the expected occupancy of the building?
I think I can take a shot at that one. Thank you for your question, Catherine. Right now, we're kind of in a strange new world with COVID in terms of, employee density. That said, life science, biotech, real estate tends to be, kind of the least employee dense of uses as opposed to office or some other use. We would probably guesstimate that there'd be one employee per 375 square feet to 400 square feet, which, if you extrapolated and did out the math, would indicate, a potential full occupancy of somewhere between, 500 and 550. We wouldn't know exactly, obviously, but that would be just kind of a rule of measure, if you will.
Okay, thank you for that. With that, we have another hand raised. Angie Canellis, good to see you, Counselor. You should be able to unmute your mic, and the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think that this was a wonderful presentation, very, very detailed, and able to answer many questions before they're even asked. But just following up on the conversations with the MBTA, are the plans that we've seen this evening finalized with the MBTA? And second follow-up to a previous speaker, how many parking spaces are being lost on Galen Street? Thank you.
Well, I think with respect to the T in the town, the talks are ongoing. I think we've got an indication from the T that they've generally accepted the layout of the park and the roadway, and they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's and doing a double check on turning radius and just to make sure. But conceptually, in terms of the bus stop on the side of the park closest to the T, yeah, I think we're in general agreement on that, and want to thank the town leadership for really taking a strong leadership position on that. In terms of the bus lane, not sure exactly where that stands, but that has been part and parcel of all our discussions. In terms of the number of parking spaces that would be lost, I'd have to double check on that, Councilor Canales, because there were, as you know, 7 curb cuts along that way. So in other words, you had a house, and then you had another driveway, and then you had Valvoline with 2 curb cuts. So there weren't opportunities for extended parking. If I had to guesstimate, it's probably about 11, maybe 11 spaces, but I will verify that and confirm that with you.
Thank you, Bob. So I don't see any hands raised at the moment, so I'll continue with the text-based comments for the moment. From Mary also, how have you mitigated the increase in traffic on Moore Street as a major cut through? I'm not sure if Jeff, if you want to take that one.
So the way we're trying not to increase or induce traffic on Moore Street is really, as I mentioned, it's really to improve the traffic flow along Galen Street and make sure that the traffic signal that we're installing at Aldrich Road provides sufficient capacity to be able to allow that to be the most efficient way to get into the project site itself. Right, we're not planning to install any traffic calming features along Morse, given the fact that we weren't doing anything with respect to adding capacity or making it more difficult at other locations so that Moore Street would become more advantageous to get to Galen Street. But to the extent that that is a concern, we can look at whether there's appropriate traffic calming measures that might be able to be introduced along Moore Street as well. Again, neighborhood focused in consultation with the neighborhood, so that we're making sure that it's not something, as one of the previous speakers mentioned, the intent is not to remove parking or do anything like that, but to install very targeted improvements that would slow traffic down and to the extent that we can make it so that it's not comfortable to be driving down any of these neighborhood streets if you're trying to go at a high rate of speed to try to avoid traffic.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Next text-based question. It's similar to one that was asked before, but I want to make sure the person knows that we're not ignoring it. It's from iMac24. Which company is moving in, which is similar to occupancy, which company is moving in and offering this non-SOV incentive?
Well, we don't know which company is moving in. This is a speculative development, and we hope to take advantage of the robust economic conditions and the life science, frankly, explosion, if you will. So we don't know that. We would be actively marketing it if we're approved. Secondly, with respect to the SOV question, I think that's pretty much standard fare right now from an employer to an employee, because they've got to attract and retain talent. So that's one way that they can make it easy for an employee. It's a perk that I think generally most companies would be pleased to give. I know that perhaps David can weigh in on this because his firm is a prime example of it.
David, you're on mute, just as an FYI. David, I'm going to send a command to unmute your mic. There you go. You should be able to take yourself off mute. David, just as an FYI, you're on mute.
David, it's in the upper corner of your, yeah, there you go.
I just got it. Sorry about that. Yeah, you're seeing it now as a much more common benefit that is offered by a number of companies. We do it here at Elkus Manfredi Architects. It is very, very effective because basically, as Jeff said, the transit becomes free. It is a benefit offered by the employer to the employee, and we've seen out of our population, I can't give you an exact percentage. I'll actually have somebody check it out, but a very high percentage of people are taking advantage of it because it replaces the cost of any kind of personal vehicles and the cost of parking.
Thanks, David. And I know, geez, sitting, you know, in the square to my right, project architect Tim Talon is a avid cyclist, and I know that he takes advantage of that program. So thank you for the answer.
And I think some people were sharing some of the similar thoughts, because the next question that was in, Brooke, I'm going to read it in, although I think we have an answer, or we have a response, I should say, excuse me. Brooke was asking, who are the tenants? Are they known? I think we've talked about, we don't know that quite yet. And then Catherine asked, has this incentive, I believe, which we're talking about the reduction for SOVs, but I'll ask it anyway here. Has this incentive method been used successfully elsewhere, and can you give us an example? And I believe we just talked about that just a little bit. So it's good to see those questions come in back to back. Next comment and question comes in from John, commenting about all excellent questions prior to his in the thread, excuse me. I wonder about the environmental risks related to the lab work being done. Also, what is the completion date for the project? I think we talked about completion date a little bit ago, but I'm not sure if Bob or team, if you want to offer anything else.
I would just say thank you, John, for the question. You know, the estimated time of construction would be, 2 years. In terms of a biosafety hazard, Watertown has adopted very stringent rules regulating this industry on the storage of materials and as such. And so, any tenant going in there would be subject to very stringent rules, guidelines, and regulating this industry, the storage of materials. And
John, I just put your line on mute because we were hearing, I think, your TV coming in. So I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get the crosstalk there. Sorry about that. I just wanted to let you know that's why I did that. So, okay. Moving on to the next one was a question from Mary. Who retains responsibility for maintaining?
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, did you have anything else to offer?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. From Mary, who retains the responsibility for maintaining and policing the green space?
Well, thanks for your question, Mary. I think we have the responsibility to maintain and take care of, and the public, the citizens get the benefit of it. So it's publicly accessible, but privately managed and maintained.
Great, thank you for that. Next is from Anne-Marie Clunin. Anne-Marie comments to the development team, thanks for the well thought out presentation, and asks a series of questions. I'm just going to start with one for now because I want to make sure we try to get to as many as we can. And of course, if there's time, we'll come back and get to the remainder of Anne-Marie's questions. But the first one is, can you speak to building occupancy versus parking spaces?
Sure. So thanks for that question. Building occupancy, I think there's a potential max occupancy of, somewhere between 500 and 550 people. That's a guesstimate on my part. It's based on standard industry kind of allowances, but we're in a pandemic world, and so we're seeing even, less employee density. So in terms of parking, we're providing 277 spaces, which works out to about 1.4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So you can see the ratio 277 to potentially 500, and that's what I would consider to be kind of a urban, parking allocation. We've been encouraged to try to reduce on-site parking and unsightly on-site parking, structured parking, and the like, and to encourage, to the extent possible, alternative means of transportation, which Jeff has talked about at length tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, just a reminder for those on the telephone, *9 raises your hand to speak a verbal comment. And again, for those who are now brought in as panelists, if you scroll to the very bottom, you can raise your hand that way. So continuing on with the next text question was from Ruth Rappaport. It's kind of a comment, then a question. The first comment is basically commenting about the safety issue at Nonantum and Water Street. And until prior to some reconstruction years ago, it was a site of so many dangerous and fatal injurious collisions. And many people lost lives and suffered injuries. And the question related to that is, how can you ensure that we will not go back to an unsafe condition? A previous development proposed for a local site was voted down for those reasons. Would you consider erecting a traffic light there?
Well, I'd kind of defer to that a little bit to Jeff, and then also, a little bit to the town. That's a town, and it's a state road there, and the town's certainly aware of what's going on there. We want to do our good part in, obviously mitigating situations like that. But I'll defer. Maybe Jeff can weigh in a little bit as well.
You're right. I think it's, Bob, it is a combination of, we have some structured improvements that we're going to be doing. I would say that one of the locations that is a location where we will be conducting a road safety audit at that location. And so that's gonna, a direct result of that will be the definition of specific improvements to look at what could be done to alleviate that safety concern at that location. We have committed to implementing some of the improvements that come as a result of that study. And again, those improvements would be targeted towards pedestrian and bicycle modes. And so to the extent that that study and the report identifies specific measures, we've committed to working to advance those measures. So that's something, as you said, there's probably been some proposals and they've never kind of gone forward. Well, this project is a commitment to implementing safety measures at locations such as that.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Next in our, next in our queue is from Anne-Marie Clunin asking, who incurs the expense for those adaptive traffic signals that Jeff was mentioning?
Thanks, Anne-Marie. We do. The project proponent does.
Okay, thank you for that response. Caitlin, will the bus lane, I'm sorry, from Caitlin Armstrong, excuse me, will the bus lane take a lane out of Galen Street?
It does not. It's added. So it's it's being added to Galen Street. So there's no reduction in terms of the number of travel lanes at all.
Okay. The next question is from Hannah Goldberg, commenting on dense traffic already in the 164 Galen Street area, and then asking, will traffic get worse in that area?
Well, we don't think so, and I'll defer to Jeff on this, but I think one of the key findings of the peer review report was, with the proposed improvements and the bus lane, that the traffic flow on Galen Street should improve. In fact, I think they used the word, it's a significant improvement over present conditions. But I'll ask Jeff if I'm wandering too far off here.
No, that's right. That was the conclusion of the review consultant with the improvements. And again, these are improvements that are being done at no cost to the town. They're being undertaken as a part of this project, the development that's going to take place here. And significant is that adaptive traffic signal control. And to the extent that it might sound counterintuitive, installing the traffic signal at the new Aldrich Road intersection with Water Street does actually improve traffic flow with the adaptive control technology, because what it is creating is another stop. It creates a stop point for us to gather up traffic at an intersection, get it into this adaptive system, and then move it through the next set of intersections. So that is a benefit, because it is packaging up traffic into these queues, and then we move the queues along the corridor. And so that's what adaptive signal control technologies do. And providing that additional traffic signal allows us to to provide another control point before traffic enters Watertown Square so that we're effectively managing traffic.
Great. Thank you for that, Jeff and Bob. Next, we have a comment and then a question. So I'll give it the 1-2 punch. First comment is from Ruth Rappaport. Flashing lights are good for pedestrians along Nonantum Road, but she believes it will still be unsafe for cars coming from Galen and from Newton Brighton, and her preference is for a full traffic light. That's the comment. But related to traffic also is from John asking a question, did the traffic volume get underestimated for this project? And Jeff, I believe you spoke about when the traffic counts were taken earlier.
Yeah, so I guess taking it in reverse order, all of the traffic counts were pre-COVID. So the baseline number, so the 15 intersections that I had mentioned that we studied, all of that traffic data was collected pre-COVID. Any traffic counts at the added intersections that we spoke about, those ones were taken after any of the shutdowns had taken place. However, because we had pre-COVID traffic volumes, we were able to make appropriate adjustments at all of the studies, intersections in Watertown, all of those intersections, the data was collected pre-COVID. So it's valid data. And it also allows for us going forward to adjust any numbers that we might need to do to account for the COVID restrictions, as we have good baseline data to start from. So back to Nonantum Road, there was discussion about what was described as more positive traffic control. So rather than the flashing lights, the full traffic signal, as you had mentioned, there are state and federal criteria that have to be met to install a fully controlled intersection, whether it's the new hawk beacon or a traffic signal. And those criteria based on speed and volume of traffic and pedestrian and bicycle crossings. Looking at the Nonantum Road intersection, at least at this point, the volume of traffic in relation to the number of crossings that are taking place, unfortunately, doesn't rise to the level of triggering those criteria. So even to the extent that we would like to install some type of positive control like that, we wouldn't be allowed to, because it doesn't meet the criteria.
Great. Thank you for that. Just as a point of order, it's 8:51. We're going to go about 5 more minutes till about 8:55, 8:56. And then wrap it up. I know we have some questions we haven't got to, but Bob Doherty's got something to say during the closeout about remaining questions as well as setting up for the next meeting. So let's try to get to a few more questions we have in the queue, and then I'll hand it over to the development team to close it out. Next one was a comment with a question from Catherine Armstrong, commenting about the particular slide that talks about the taxes being paid to the town. So whoever covered that slide, and I apologize if you could maybe reiterate a little bit or expand a little more on what was described in the presentation.
Sure. Thank you for the question. The $2.3 million annual tax payment, estimated tax payment to the town was based on discussions with the assessing department very recently, taking a look at some of the other, like the links, and looking at the commercial rate. So how they come up with a dollar figure like that would be to really look at the valuation of the building, the income that would generate, shows you kind of a value of the building per square foot, and then the tax rate's been established. The tax rate for commercial is $13.50 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. So it's just a simple mathematical calculation, and we're probably looking at, and that's in today's dollars, who knows, could be more, $2.3 million in annual tax revenue versus, I believe it's generating somewhere in the high 90s, $90,000 currently in its existing condition.
Okay, thank you for that. Next is a question, and also there was a later question related to it, but I'm going to bring it up. First off, the later question was from Gideon, the planner. Thank you for sharing this. The meeting video will be posted to the WCATV website. So for those of you wishing to go back and watch that, you'll be welcome to do so. On a related note, the question John asks is, will there be an email attachment of this presentation that can be shared out, or a copy of the slides, I'm guessing is what he means. Okay. I'm not sure if anyone wants to respond to that or if we can move along with the next 2 minutes. This is from Jay Beatty. We talked about bus lanes a little bit, but the question is the new bus lane installed where the current sidewalk is?
So the answer is no, is primarily in the parking lane. However, what you saw in terms of the cross sections that I think both Tim and Shauna showed was that the design of the building is actually such that we're going to be providing, I believe, a wider sidewalk that exists out there today along the frontage of the building. So to the extent that there's any reduction in terms of what exists there today, when the project's completed, you will end up with a larger sidewalk than exists today.
Great. Thank you for that. There's a couple other questions about the Q&A, so I don't need to read those in. That essentially almost brings us to, there's one more short question, then we have two kind of lengthier ones, and I'll save those because I think that those are actually good segues into the next meeting. So I'll share this last quick question and then hand over to you, Bob, to close this out. So the last short question we have here from Sophia Gallimore was, Gallimore, excuse me. Are there plans to have EV charging stations?
Yes, we will have EV charging stations in the building. We're planning 15 spaces, or approximately 5% of the parking spaces with EV charging stations.
Great. Thank you for that, Tim. Okay, looking at time, it's 8:55. I'm thankful to the development team for extending beyond what we were planning, but some really great Q&A. So with that, I'll stop talking and turn the floor back to Bob to close us out and kind of set us up for what we do next.
Sure. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate all you did on the moderation. It's tough to keep track of everything, so kudos to you. Thank everybody really for your time and consideration this evening. We presented a lot of material and perhaps it took a little bit longer than we might have anticipated. So we did want to leave some additional time because I know everyone was patient and people have questions. So I just want to assure you that we will do our best to answer every single question. We're going to reconvene next Thursday night, October 8th at the same time. And we could, at the opening, maybe continue the Q&A, but we want to answer to the fullest extent possible everybody's questions, concerns, and comments. So thank you once again for your patience and consideration this evening. Look forward to seeing you all next week, or some of you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. With that, have a good evening.